Hello everybody and welcome to another A+ 1102 lesson with some practice exam questions at the end of the video where I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about all of this right here. We're going to look at social engineering, threats and vulnerabilities. What are all of these? And then I'll give you those practice questions at the end to make sure you are ready for your exam and you can walk in there with the confidence that you need. So let's get straight to it. We'll start with social engineering. Actually, before we start, I'll just briefly go over the difference between these things. So we have three different categories of things you need to know about for this exam objective for your 1102 exam. Social engineering refers to techniques that scammers may use in order to trick you using human psychology. So this is not about software or hardware. This is about psychological tactics that scammers will use in order to trick you to doing something that you don't want to do, whether that be downloading malware or and allowing them access to your system, right? Any kind of psychological tactic is a social engineering, within the social engineering category. Threats. A threat is something outside of your system that wants to attack you, right? So if something is, think about it, if you have a house and your house has really good security, has security cameras everywhere, you've hired security guards, even if your system is very highly secure, even if there's someone out on the street who is thinking about breaking in, they're a threat, right? So regardless of whether your house is really secure or completely insecure, that threat is outside. How secure your house is simply going to determine the likelihood of that threat actually having any impact on you. So, you've got if someone tries to shut down your system, for example, you might have things in place to stop that from being effective. But if they attack you, even if it's ineffective, that's a threat. So a threat is something outside of your system, outside of your device, that intends to do harm. Think of it that way. The next category is vulnerabilities. So this is referring to your house or your system itself. So if you have a house but one of the windows won't lock or won't close, that would be a vulnerability. Or if you have a house but you can't lock the door, that's a vulnerability. Even if there's no threat outside, even if there's no one outside that wants to break in, your house still has that vulnerability. So these are things within your system that makes that it's an opening for attack. If someone wanted to attack you here, potentially they could, and it may very well work because your system is vulnerable. So it's important to understand the key distinction between those three before we get into this, because on your exam you might be asked, is this describing social engineering or a threat or vulnerability, for example? So make sure you're somewhat familiar with that. Now, we'll get straight into the social engineering, so phishing. So look, phishing, it's an attempt to, generally you're sending an email or a message and it's widespread. So it's not specifically targeting someone. It's trying to just spam it out there, and you're hoping that someone will bite, and it's a numbers game, right? You're sending it to a lot of people, surely one of them will bite. Now, this is often disguised as legitimate source like a bank or a credit card company, usually a very popular one, because statistically, if it's popular, someone that you send it to is going to expect an email from them, right? These trick the recipients into clicking malicious links or attachments. These links can lead to fake websites designed to steal login credentials, or they can download malware, right? So the key thing to know about this is it's widespread. It's not specifically targeted. The next one is vishing. And this is essentially the same thing as phishing, but it's using your voice. It's using a phone call. It can often be a robocall. So you get those phone calls where you pick up, they don't talk for a few seconds, and then it's like, hello, you have been called by a scammer. Please give us your data. Obviously not like that. They try to disguise themselves, but you understand. Instead of email, it's just in voice format, right? So they try to impersonate trusted entities and pressure victims into revealing their information. So they're trying to get you to think they're legitimate over the phone, and you give them verbal information. Shoulder surfing is basically just describing someone is standing behind you and they're watching what you're doing over your shoulder. They might collect your password. They might have a look at your login data or some kind of information, your PIN to access your bank account. Whatever they're trying to do, shoulder surfing just describes someone looking over your shoulder and seeing what you're doing. Apparently we need a specific term for that. And then whaling. So this is a upgraded version of phishing. So whaling is phishing, but you're specifying your message with a particular individual in mind. You're targeting a high profile individual within an organization. So it will usually be the CEO or an executive of an organization. Attackers leverage email or phone calls to impersonate someone the victim trusts and attempt to steal information or gain access to critical systems. So generally, this one requires the attackers to gain a lot more information on the person that they are targeting because it's specified to them. So they need to figure out who they know, who do they trust, what are their interests, right? And using that information, they will formulate a specific phishing email targeted to that person that's much more likely to convince them in particular that they are who they say they are and get that information. The next one is tailgating. This is essentially just when someone follows you through a door, right? Remember a few exam objectives ago, we talked about the access control vestibule where the door had to close behind you before someone else could come through. You had to go through the door, close the door, go through the next door. That was to prevent tailgating, which is just where someone follows you through by, so they gain access to a secure physical location by following closely behind an authorized person. And then we have impersonation. This is where you're pretending to be someone you're not. Pretty intuitive, right? And then we've got dumpster diving, which is just where literally the attackers are searching through discarded documents or physical media, such as USB drives, to steal sensitive information that may not be properly disposed of. So literally they're going through your garbage to find anything you may have thrown out that could be of use to them. And finally, you have an evil twin. So an evil twin is when the attacker creates a fake Wi-Fi network with a name similar to a legitimate network. So for example, the actual Wi-Fi might be coffee shop free Wi-Fi, and they might create one that says coffee shop free _ Wi-Fi. It looks similar, and there's a good chance people will accidentally connect to that fake Wi-Fi or that evil twin. And when they do connect to the evil twin, the attacker can intercept their internet traffic and steal their data. So that is important to know for your exam as well. So that's all the social engineering you need to know about. Now we're up to the threats. A denial of service threat, remember something outside your system that potentially wants to do harm to you, is when an attacker floods the system with requests, overwhelming its resources and preventing legitimate users from accessing it. So it doesn't necessarily actually have to be flooding the system. It can just be in any way you're shutting the system down. So technically, if you run up to the power cable and cut it with a pair of scissors, that would also be a denial of service. Basically, it's anything that makes a service or a system no longer be able to provide its service. You can do that in any way, shape, or form. Now, the key between that one and the next one, which is a distributed denial of service, is in this distributed denial of service, it's when it is launched from multiple compromised devices to make it harder to identify and mitigate the attack source. So basically, you're going to have a lot more traffic because generally what's happened here is this in brackets when it says often a botnet, that basically is describing when malware has been installed on multiple different devices all around the world, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, and that malware is designed to utilize that hacked computer's device to send traffic to a specific source. So these are hacked computers all over the world, hundreds, thousands of them that have been designed to send traffic to a source with the pure intention of denying service, of shutting down a system or a server. The next one we need to know about is a zero-day attack. So this is essentially when someone exploits a vulnerability in software that was not known before. So no one has known about it. And if you haven't known about it, you can't patch it. Now here's the thing. To protect against a zero-day attack, you can't. You cannot protect against a zero-day attack simply because it is exploiting a vulnerability that no one has known about before. So this person who's doing this zero-day attack is generally going to be the first person to discover this vulnerability. So that's a key thing to know about this. You cannot protect against it. The only way to protect against it is if you discover the vulnerability before someone exploits it, but generally how a vulnerability is discovered is because it gets exploited. So for your exam, really you cannot protect against a zero-day attack. The way to protect against attacks is to patch your system and make sure it's secure because you've identified a gap. But if it's a zero-day attack, you haven't identified a gap because no one knows about that vulnerability yet. So there's really not a lot you can do about it. Spoofing is when an attacker disguises their identity, so it could be their IP address or their website, to trick a system or user into trusting them. This can be used to launch phishing attacks or gain unauthorized access. So you might change your IP address or any of your information to say it is something that it actually isn't. Spoofing is when you pretend you're something you're not. An on-path attack is when an attacker intercepts communication between two parties on a network. Person A is sending information to person B. The on-path attack is when you're sitting in the middle and reading what's going on between the two. You can actually capture it and change it along the way as well. So if person A sends ABC, you can actually capture it and change it to BCD and then continue it along its way, and the person they were originally sending it to will receive BCD, right? So that is an on-path attack. And then brute force attack is where you're basically just trying any combination of random syllables and keystrokes to guess a password, right? Just completely random, trying every possible combination. Dictionary attack is a subsect of a brute force attack. But instead of doing random combinations, a brute force attack uses a list of commonly used words or phrases to guess passwords. So it's actually using specifically commonly used phrases to try to guess that password, the most common words, the most common passwords. They have a list that they're going through. It's not just random numbers and syllables. And then an insider threat is someone that is within the organization that is trying to do something bad to that organization. They work within that organization. It could be a disgruntled employee, a contractor, or a business partner with authorized access to systems or data. And then the last two, there's going to be a key distinction between these two. I really want you to pay attention to this because it's going to help you on your exam. Structured query language injection, or SQL injection, is when an attacker injects malicious SQL code into user input fields on websites or applications. So on a website where you type something in, right, they're inputting SQL code into that. This code then can trick the database, so it's interacting with the database, into performing unauthorized actions such as stealing data. So they'll put SQL code into those fields on websites where you type things in, and it tricks the database because the database sees that code and it activates that code, and it can then return data to that person who's put that in that it necessarily shouldn't be actually showing people. So that's interacting with the database. Now that's different to cross-site scripting, or XSS. Cross-site scripting is when attackers inject malicious scripts into websites that are then executed in a user's browser when they visit the website. So that's the key distinction. SQL injection is interacting with the database. Cross-site scripting is interacting with the user's browser. That distinction alone should be enough to help you differentiate between those two for your exam. So just make sure that's the thing you focus on. Other than that, cross-site scripting, so the scripts activate when another user visits the website, it activates in their browser. These scripts can steal cookies, session IDs, or redirect users to malicious websites. Or onto vulnerabilities. So again, remember, vulnerabilities are like chinks in your armor. It's the things in your system that make you vulnerable to attack. These are things people or attackers can take advantage of. So again, as outlined here, they're weaknesses or flaws in your systems, networks, or also key to recognize, it's also human behavior that can be exploited by the attacker. So if you have someone working for you that quite frankly is just stupid, they're a vulnerability. If they're going to leave their personal access, username and password broadcasted on their desktop whenever they leave their desk and that screen is facing the street, that stupid person working for you is a vulnerability. It's not just about your system, it's also about the humans that are working in your system as well. So make sure you don't have stupid people working for you. That's when that user training, anti-phishing training, anti-malware training comes into play. You can have the best system defense in the world, but if you have the vulnerability of silly humans working for you, none of that matters because they're just going to let the threats right in. Now, that being said, here's the ones that you need to know about specifically for your exam. Unpatched system is an outdated software with unaddressed security vulnerabilities. Basically, it's not updated and it's not patched against the most recent threats. A non-compliant system is a system that is not adhering to an organization's security policies. So for whatever reason, it is not adhering to the specific organization's security policies. And then we have an unprotected system. So that is a system lacking essential security software like antivirus or firewalls. If you don't have antivirus or a firewall, you're probably going to get infected by something. End-of-life operating system is an operating system that no longer receives security updates and support because it's no longer supported. So there's no ongoing support. You're not going to want to have end-of-life because you're basically going to be left open to known vulnerabilities and there's going to be no patches for those. And then bring your own device, or BYOD, which is of course when people bring their own device to work, is a security risk. it's describing security risks associated with employees bringing their devices for work. So, of course, they're going to be bringing in their personal data as well. They'll have other programs on there potentially that could introduce additional vulnerabilities, right? So that their system can get hacked, and from there, the attacker can jump into the organization's data, and it can just go somewhere really bad where you don't want it to go. So just know about those vulnerabilities, and you should be okay. Now we'll quickly go through some questions for this exam, and then we'll be ready to take the 1102 exam, at least tackle this exam objective. So let's get to it. The first one reads, you're working the night shift at a large corporation when you receive a seemingly urgent email from your bank. The email subject reads, urgent, data breach, immediate action required. The email body claims a potential data breach and instructs you to click on a link to verify your account information and prevent unauthorized access. While feeling some concern, you also notice a few grammatical errors in the email that raise suspicion. Which social engineering technique is at play here? A. Phishing, B. Whaling, C. Vishing only, or D. Shoulder surfing. Pause the video if you need more time. Your answer in 3, 2, 1, now. The answer is A, phishing. So remember, phishing is when it's broad scale. It's not specifically targeted. And the reason we know it's broad scale is because it's an email from your bank. It's not specifically talking to you necessarily. It's just a popular bank, and it just says urgent data breach, immediate action required. There's nothing specifically targeting you. There's nothing in here mentioning you are a high-level CEO or executive, which would make it whaling. It's an email. It's not a phone call. If it was a phone call, it would be vishing. And remember, shoulder surfing is when someone's looking over your shoulder to get your data or information. So it is phishing for that one. Next question reads, you're attending a cybersecurity conference at a prestigious hotel. As you wait in line to enter a restricted session, someone holding a briefcase and wearing a business suit approaches the security guard, flashes a badge that you can't quite see the details of, and is allowed entry. Moments later, you notice the same person again, lingering by the entrance and looking impatient. You suspect the person might not be legitimate. Based on this scenario, which social engineering techniques could be at play? A. Dumpster diving, B. Tailgating, C. Impersonation, or D. Evil twin. Your answer coming in 3, 2, 1, now. It is impersonation. So the key giveaway for impersonation was they were trying to hold a briefcase, they were wearing a business suit, and they had a badge that they were trying to flash. They were trying to pretend to be someone they weren't, right? Remember, tailgating would be if they tried to follow someone through. There was nothing about following anyone through, but they were clearly trying to be someone that they weren't. So impersonation is the answer there. Have a read through the others if you need more of an explanation, but we went through that before. Now, the next one says, you are a security analyst investigating a recent attack on your company's website. Here's what you have observed. The website has been bombarded with an overwhelming amount of traffic for the past few hours, making it inaccessible to legitimate users. Your team hasn't identified any new vulnerabilities in the website software that could be exploited. A security researcher recently published details about a critical flaw in a widely used web server software version your company runs. Based on the scenario, which cyber attack technique is most likely involved? A. DDoS, or distributed denial of service, B. DOS, or denial of service, C. Zero-day attack, or D. Spoofing. Pause the video if you need more time. Your answer in 3, 2, 1, now. It is a distributed denial of service attack. So let's have a look. You have been bombarded with an overwhelming amount of traffic for the past few hours. So bombarded and overwhelming imply a lot of traffic. So you can't do that just from one system. It's going to have to be distributed denial of service, because to get that much traffic, you're going to need a lot of machines working for you. The second it's a lot of machines, it's distributed denial of service. Your team hasn't identified any new vulnerabilities in the website software. So there's nothing about a specific vulnerability here. It's just simply a lot of traffic. And then a security researcher published details about a critical flaw in a widely used web server software version your company runs. So we're looking at a server, right? So basically what we get from this is there's a lot of traffic heading towards a server. That's going to be distributed denial of service attack. That is what that is describing. So we'll make this, I'll have to do one on this, and then I'll have to get going because I've got to leave for work soon. So if you want any of the other questions here, you can get it in my learning guide, journeytocyber.com 1102 A+ learning guide there. The next question reads, you're a security analyst reviewing the findings of a recent audit at a large hospital. The audit identified multiple vulnerabilities across various departments, analyzed the following scenario, and choose the most significant vulnerability categories it represents. The radiology department uses specialized medical imaging software to diagnose patients, and the audit revealed multiple concerning issues. While the hospital has a corporate policy requiring antivirus and firewall protection on all devices, some radiology department workstations were found to be missing this critical security software altogether. And the audit noted that some radiology staff have not completed mandatory cybersecurity training, potentially leading to risky practices like using unauthorized portable storage devices to transfer patient data. So, are the vulnerabilities in question A, non-compliant systems and unprotected systems, or unprotected systems and unpatched systems, or C, unpatched systems and non-compliant systems, or D, EOL OSs, remember what that means, and non-compliant systems? Your answer coming in 3, 2, 1. Pause the video if you need more time. It is non-compliant systems and unprotected systems. So this talks about two different vulnerabilities here. Non-compliant systems. So the staff were not complying with the hospital's cybersecurity policies specifically. So that is inherently a non-compliant system. A system doesn't necessarily mean a system itself. It could also just mean like the systems in place, or the people have engaging in a non-compliant system of operating, right? And then we have the unprotected systems, the missing antivirus and firewall protection left the system unprotected. Now, technically, right, we could say that in the question, it did say that the antivirus and firewall protection were missing, which were part of the corporate policy. So that really is also describing non-compliant systems. Regardless, this is the most correct answer because we had nothing to do about. There is nothing about unpatched systems. There's nothing about a lack of updates. So it is not B. Again, we have unpatched. There's nothing about a lack of updates, so it's not C. And then end of life. There's nothing about it being end of life, the operating system no longer being supported. So it could not be those three answers. So just by process of elimination, even though technically it's like, that was kind of technically describing this one, it's just which answer is most correct. I want to get you in the habit of finding which answer is most correct. So with that being said, if you have enjoyed this video, head over to journeytocyber.com. I have my A+ 1102 learning guide there ready for you to go. I have comprehensive notes, active recall questions, and practice exam questions for every single exam objective, broken down even further into every single dot point for every single exam objective. So with that being said, guys, here's what people have said about it. I don't comment a lot, but it helps with organized information. Your learning guide is goated. Update your notes, help me pass my test today. All right, I gotta go to work. I gotta call it here. If you want it, it's at A+ 1102. Sorry, it's at journeytocyber.com, my A+ 1102 learning guide. You'll be as happy as that guy if you grab it. If you don't, no worries. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for choosing me to walk you through your A+ 1102 journey. I'm late for work. I gotta go. Bye, guys.